Ain't right.
What do you do, Dad, for a living?
You
I don't know.
do it in your sleep. We provide. We're hunters and gatherers, man.
Yeah.
Hey, Rob Browne here with you. Thursday morning, May 9th, 2024. Grand Bob, I got to remind him. And he spoke last night. And so he said, don't forget to put the date. Hey, got Matt Dean, John Hartwell, Gary Harris joining us. A lot to talk about in the college football world. Talking with agents, talking to different people. I see the light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not a freight train out of control coming our way. We're working our way out of this. We're working our way back. Hey, smash the subscribe button, bottom right-hand corner. Allow notifications on your Android or iPhone. Hear us live, hear us later. Sync us from anywhere. We'll be right back. Get pen and paper handy.
Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
All right, man, we are rolling right out of the box, man. 8.5, isn't that what they called it, riding that bull? I think 8 seconds or 8.5. John Hartwell, ULMAD, with us right now. Matt Dean, Associate AD over at Rhodes College in Memphis. Brenden Martin, our executive producer down in Ocala, Florida. And tell you one thing, man, late night TV takes a backseat to late night Weather Channel, Fox Weather Nation, some wild weather all over the South. Tell you one thing, man, pay attention to those warnings. Pay attention, listen up, and always sleep in your tennis shoes if you're under a tornado watch, because if something happens, you got to get up. You better have your shoes. You ain't going to be able to function. A lot is happening, and I'm going to ask both of y'all right off the bat. We're swinging. It blows my mind when people don't understand this, but it's true. You talk to people in traditional fundraising arms at colleges all over the country. They're already talking about these collectives that are everywhere. They're going to just go away because the universities are going to start paying. And it's a different world we live in, but donor fatigue, guys. And I'll start with John. You got people, you got to build brick and mortar. And Houston Nutt was in Memphis at the Touchdown Club Monday night. And he said, all these facilities, we've spent all this money, collectively billions across the country. Recruit comes in with his mom and his dad and his family and his 15 or 20 people in his entourage. Weight room, check. It's great. Stadium, check. Great. Campus, great. Check. Good looking girls everywhere. Check. Cafeteria, check. 2 words before they leave. That's all that matters. How much? Quanta cuesta. John Hartwell. That's why I'm telling you donor fatigue is going to burn out. You can't continue to go back to people over and over and over, especially the same people, if there's no return on investment. That's what I know in my business brain. That's what I know in my sports brain. You and John and Matt are 2 of the smartest people I know. John, I'll start with you. Am I right or wrong?
Well, first off, I don't want to speak for Matt, but you need to enlarge your circle of friends if we're 2 of the smartest people you know. But
you're both very smart. He's from Iowa.
But yeah, it's we're dealing with it on a daily basis. Last week, when the last couple of days of the portal as it relates to FBS football, in terms of going in and you can say there's not tampering, you can say all that. We had a young man who was an all-league player for us last year who has been a cornerstone, kind of what Coach Vincent is building. The program is much bigger than any one individual, but decides at the last minute to go in and, for Monroe standards, he was doing pretty well NIL wise. And just got voices out there. I'll leave it at that. That's probably a non-controversial term. that he could get paid more and went in the portal. And, it's so you lose one, but, now we're in the battle for a couple others. We're looking for a quarterback, and that's obviously a premium. But, when you look at schools at the Power 5 level who are paying six figures plus for a backup quarterback, that's telling a kid they are coming in to be on the bench unless Johnny or Jimmy, the starting quarterback, gets hurt. And we're trying to compete with that. So, and it's, it's gone beyond how much in terms of dollars. Are you going to provide me a furnished apartment? Are you going to provide me a vehicle? I mean, there's all kinds of pieces to this puzzle now. And somewhere, I've been saying this for months. We've got to get some parameters around it. And I know, the House settlement, the NCAA, thing out there about, lawsuit out there about, hey, or how much is going to be provided. Here's what I'll tell you, and this has always occurred through time. There will always be coaches and always be staffs looking for an additional angle. So if that comes and, a dollar amount, a threshold is set, somebody's going to push that envelope, and we've got to, I'm not Chicken Little. I'm not saying the sky's falling. We will find players, and we'll benefit some out of the portal. We'll lose some from the portal, but somewhere there's got to be some parameters around it, because here is what I am really concerned about. At the end of the day, we are all supposed to be in the education business, and I promise you, education, getting a diploma, all of those things is not on the forefront of a lot of these kids or their families' minds right now. It's you said it very eloquently. It comes down to two words: how much? How much am I getting? And it's a little bit of it's an upheaval. Every day is a different day, and I'll just say this. A lot that old saying about adapt or die. You can't say, well, you can't dig in and say, well, we're not doing this, because if you don't do it, you're not going to be able to compete at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt Dean, your thoughts?
John, as always, and good to see you, John. I hope you're feeling better. I'm talking a while. I know you went through a patch there. I hope you're doing well. But here's the thing. As a coach, I used to make my living on developing players. And what has happened at a lot of programs like John's, not necessarily mine, because, the difference in the athlete and non-scholarship and the full scholarship athlete is significant, though. I will tell you, there's a handful of kids that we developed by year 3 that could probably play, not necessarily start, could be a part of John's team's roster in certain regards. But the reality is we're getting shelled on development at places like ULM because coach does his job, kid does their job, and they are getting, in better words, poached to go play somewhere else for a significant amount of money. And in some cases, I'll tell you, yesterday, Iowa just added a backup quarterback, Brenden Sullivan from Northwestern. He will compete with Cade McNamara, who transferred from Michigan when he lost his job to J.J. McCarthy 2 years ago. Yeah. So, and Iowa is behind in the NIL dollar amount. I can tell you that because I have friends that work for the institution and know people on the collectives. Though I'm sure they did whatever they could to keep Caitlin Clark, because she wasn't leaving Iowa. She's an Iowa gal, They had made a run the year prior. She was going to stay and became the #1 draft pick. So it's really discouraging, because as an old coach, someone that still works with our post players right now, we're taking away from the fundamental thing that's the best in the business, is developing kids and making them better. And then by that player that John's referencing, I don't even know his name or whatever, but you're hopeful that senior year, he's an all-conference player, first-team all-conference player, maybe gets a UDFA or a low-round NFL opportunity, and the system works, right? That's the way it worked forever. And the system's been changed forever now, too. And you can talk about salary cap. We still don't know how that would work. You can talk about, how many times they can go in and out of the portal. I was amazed after the Oregon spring game. I talked to my son and said, "Hey, you guys look pretty good." He's like, "Yeah, well, we're not done yet, Dad." I'm like, "What?" But that's just, it's really an NFL free agency model right now, John.
Yeah.
They can do whatever they want. It's almost like a waiver wire. And it's really unfortunate because no one hears the backside. And what I mean by that is when I add a portal person because of the 85 scholarship limit in football, I got to let someone go. And I got to talk to that person and say, "Hey, it's not working out." And we don't hear those stories. We hear about the social media, little highlight reel about I'm going to such and such a university. You don't know what kid that person replaced. And primarily it's probably a 3-star that was working hard to get on the field that now will end up in a place that really affects his career forever.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. We better start looking out there and saying, what do you compare what's going on in college to? Look in the business world. You look at companies, businesses. Let's say you've got a securities business. Well, how do you have people that have been there for 20 and 30 years? Well, some of them after 20 years give you a Rolex. Is that worth sticking around for? It's about payout. You've got to incentivize them. But ultimately, you've got to build a culture that is all about the employees. When I got in the bond business, salesman is the king. Now, the paperwork, and it's almost, it's unbelievable what you have to deal with. And I think, though, what makes a business successful is when the owner of the business or your manager, whatever, invest in supporting his people, sales assistants, salesmen, back office people, everybody. Little things like putting a signed birthday card on your desk on your birthday, just doing things and getting people to feel like they're part of a family. That's what you've had in college. But you got to go around. You watch these coaches in the warm-ups before the games. I'll use Kirby Smart as an example. He's in a talent-rich state, 4th highest number of Division I players in America come out of Georgia. But he'll go up and put his arm on the shoulder of every player and say something during the warm-ups. I noticed that about people. And y'all notice that. Athletic director, like John Hartwell at ULM, and you know this, Matt, he's everywhere. Social media, he's talking about the teams, not just football, which makes the money everywhere. It's softball. And by the way, would people stop saying girls softball? When we get the beer gut league with the polyester coaches shorts and the tube socks and the guys, he gone yard, the beer drinking wife escape Wednesday night deal. Come on. It's softball. It's track and field. An athletic director, when they know, here's the deal. You can't care more than they care, but when they know how much you do care, you'll keep your people around. And then I'll tell you, the guy that started all of this was Frank Broyles back at Arkansas, putting the business deals together as the athletic director at Arkansas. He was from Georgia, played for Bobby Dodd at Georgia Tech. He was not born in Little Rock and grew up calling the Hogs. You never know that, but that's the truth on him. But you started getting the coaches involved in the business deals. So you got to go to your student athletes and say, look, you can transfer. Absolutely. You can do it. We cannot deny you life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But you work on building the culture. And you say, that money, it'll be gone before you know it. The lifelong relationships. I know, you sound old school, Rob. No, I know what the hell I'm talking about. And so do y'all. But that's where it starts. And yeah, they can take the money, but look at NFL players. How many of them are broke within 3 years of getting out of the league? And why is that? The financial literacy, John Hartwell, that's what I'd be spending my time with. I'd be saying, guys, whatever money you get, invest it. Build for the future. You can make a living with your hands. You can make millions with your mind. You better get that education somehow.
Yeah, one of the very positive things about NIL, and I think collectively as administrators and coaches, we talked about this before the inception of NIL, and even in the early days, is the business values and education that it provides our student athletes. And part of that is about building your brand. And I've had that conversation with quite a few of our student athletes about, hey, when you build your brand, if you're starting over every 6 months as an individual student athlete or in the business world, when you pick up your roots and start all over again somewhere else, that puts your brand back to square one or square zero even. And so that's one of the things that we've talked. And you can argue, said, well, I was getting $3,000 a month at ULM, but I can get $10,000 a month at wherever. Like you said, don't be short-sighted in the value. And I know, that some of these young men and women come from, they don't come from middle or upper class backgrounds. They come from next to nothing and are sending money home to mom or dad or grandma or whoever. I understand that. But there are avenues, to be able to get them resources. Don't get caught up. We've got to do a better education of educating our student athletes that, don't make a short-term financial decision that's going to have a negative impact on your long-term financial decision.
What John just said is spot on. And Matt, you know it. I mean, you've got one son that's a financial advisor, one that's an assistant coach, director of scouting at Oregon. But that's right. When you try to rebrand every 3 months or 6 months, you got guys. Auburn, I'm sorry, they did. They just took a commitment from a kid that was at, let's see, I'm trying to keep it, at A&M in December, Southern Cal in January, and he commits to Auburn in April. I mean, I hope his, mattress isn't too hard or his pillows not. It better be soft enough, or the food in the cafeteria in the $7 million wellness center they built at Auburn. Kylie, I don't remember guys with stovepipe hats, chefs making my meals when I was in college. John's right, Matt. Again, you got 27% of your students at Rhodes are student athletes, and they got tough academic standards. But my kids are 23, 25, 28, and 35. They all know how to work. I go, let me tell you something. Don't get fooled by all that. And for a young kid today, the best thing someone like John Hartwell or Matt Dean can do is say, learn how to manage money. Don't let money run your life. You run your money. And Matt, you've got an opportunity to do that. I really think, and I'm seeing these comments from people, it's right. The money will run out. You can't keep going back to people. If the return on investment, that's all people look at. Private equity people, venture capital people, they want a lot of them 15, 20% ROI. Well, if they're giving money for players and they're not winning big, that'll stop. People think cynicism is too rampant, Matt, but the free market will fix this. You watch what happens. In a couple of years, we'll be going, yeah, it was right. People just said it's a fad. I know we got to do it. But kids like Caden Proctor going back to Iowa, taking their money, and then going back to Tuscaloosa. I'm sorry, that's so wrong. I want to throw up.
Well, there's a couple things going on here too, guys. I mean, football is a little bit like Major League Baseball before revenue sharing. And let me explain my thought process on that. You say the money's going to run out. The money never ran out for the New York Yankees. The money's not going to run out for Ohio State. It's not going to run out for Georgia. It's not going to run out for Alabama. So I don't disagree with the premise, but let's be real. The money's not going to run out for certain programs here. When you're winning at a high level, people want to get on the bandwagon, even if they weren't on the bandwagon. Now let's move forward to college basketball. This is one area where I think some of the kids are getting smarter. I'm a 3-year starter at a Big Ten school. I know this, and I can't say the kid's name, and I know what's going on monetarily. I become a kid that's 1,000-point scorer, tough two-way player, but the NIL deal there is probably barely 6 figures. But now I can go to an SEC school. I can get 5 times the money because I know I can't, in a 2-round draft, the best I can do is maybe overseas for a few years and maybe bounce back to the league. So I'm going to take that investment. If I'm smart, find me someone that can invest my money like Rob Browne, and I've made a strong decision. Now, you could say, well, Matt, is every kid doing it that way? I don't know. There's no way that's happening, but some are. Some are figuring out that, hey, the reason I have to leave, I know it sounds like I'm not being loyal, but it is a financial decision. I have to go somewhere that wants me now because they can pay me 3 to 5 times my market value if I stay at this like institution and show loyalty. It's actually a sound business decision for the kid.
Yeah. No, look, free market capitalism. That's why the Supreme Court's going to, House versus NCAA is going to cost like $4.2 billion is the estimate that it's going to cost the colleges nationwide in the payout. All right, switch topics. Next one. Got to give our man Franz Beard, GatorbaitMedia.com. The guy is, he is writing. He's just pounding out the content. Last night, at 3 o'clock in the morning when the storms were ripping through the South, I'm sure Franz was just writing away. Franz is a modern day Hemingway, William Faulkner, F. Scott Fitzgerald. He's just amazing. All right, best quarterbacks in the SEC. Now think about this. In Georgia's quarterback room, because I asked this question last week, why is the state of Florida not turning out as many superstar quarterbacks as you would think in a population and a talent-rich state like that compared to Texas? He's got Carson Beck, number 1, Quinn Ewers at Texas, number 2, and Brady Cook, Missouri, at number 3. Looking at those guys, Quinn Ewers went to Ohio State for a $1.4 million NIL deal, signed some autographs, won Mullet of the Year in Ohio, came back to Texas because he's from Westlake or Southlake, Carroll or whatever, came back to Texas. Brady Cook, I think he's been at Missouri the whole time. Graham Mertz transferred from Wisconsin to Florida, but the other one I was going to say, Carson Beck, Brady Cook, Graham Mertz. Okay, so Carson Beck been at Georgia the whole time, but those quarterbacks, if you don't have a quarterback, John Hartwell, it's like not having a point guard in basketball. Do y'all think 7-on-7 camps and stuff like this are why we also have so few linemen, offensive linemen? They're the hardest thing to find out there on the college landscape, John.
Yeah, I think part of it, and NIL is starting to shape this, and I think you'll see it shaped even more over the next few years. Just look at the value, and it mirrors the NFL. Unless you are a very elite lineman, you are going to have trouble making the money that skill position guys do, and it's just it's just a challenge. Now, if genetically you're built to be 6'5", 315, and you're probably not going to be a wideout.
No, I don't.
Then you're probably going the lineman route. But I think that's part of it, and but I'll also say this, that's the opportunity there. I think you see a bunch of high level offensive and defensive linemen that are probably not your most skilled athletes, but they have worked in that angle and have had young coaches. But I'll also say this, when you've got guys like David Morris at quarterback country, and you know David down there in Mobile, Rob,
yeah,
has had
played at Ole Miss,
has had a plethora of pupils that he has tutored in the quarterback room. You don't see that in the offensive or defensive line, and maybe that's a market niche for somebody to get into, to start training kids at a 5th, 6th, 7th grade level about footwork and hands and all of that to be a lineman.
I think Willie Anderson, who played at Viger down in Pritchard up in Atlanta, is doing it some. But why not someone like Steve Wallace from Chamblee, who played and won 3 or 4 Super Bowl rings as a starting left tackle for the 49ers and Joe Montana. I'm with you. I mean, they're just not teaching, and we're not seeing the linemen. I mean, now you've got 16 in the SEC. You've got them in the Sun Belt Conference, 14. That's 70. You got to have 80. Think about of those in the SEC. Jason Caldwell, Auburn Undercover, said recently, there's maybe 25 really good offensive linemen out there that everybody's chasing. Well, golly, you got to have 80 starting offensive linemen among the 16 SEC schools, 70 in the Sun Belt. That's 150 right there. It's about development. Matt Dean, if they're bouncing around from school to school, that's difficult.
Another thing, Rob, is when you're a little kid, you don't dream of being an offensive lineman. You watch the Heisman Trophy.
Oh, come on.
Okay, I want to throw the rock. I'm in the backyard trying to be MJ, hit a fadeaway as the buzzer sounds. I'm not thinking about getting my squad up to a point where I'm in the trenches and I can murder someone. I mean, that's not how we grow up. That's number one. Number two, you can talk about O-line development. The majority of time, guys, it starts in college, not high school, because it's the hardest position to coach. And if you're a good O-line or D-line coach, you can write your number in places like the SEC. What did we talk about? Was it Butch Davis, the guy that
Bo Davis,
one of the best in the business, right?
Yeah.
If you're, and I was fortunate, I've been around some great O-line coaches here at Rhodes. A lot of them are at the smaller institutions. They're just not known. The head coach I hired, Rich Duncan, what he does for our team, besides being a fantastic leader of men, he works with our O-line guys. He brought his former O-line guy as assistant coach for us. And we started 3 freshmen on the O-line last year, and we won 6 football games. So we have a bright future just because of that position. But honestly, development, it's really hard. If you're someone that's a retired NFL guy that's out there working with young kids, there's a market for that. But how many of those guys are there? It's not enough.
All right. Well, I'm going to throw one at you. Coach E, Gordon Ellingsworth over there at Rhodes.
That's the guy I was referring to. Best.
Yeah.
I mean, Coach Ellingsworth was just fantastic. And
incredible. I used to see him at the Y all the time, swimming and working out. And I've had him on the show several times over the years. God, his knowledge of the offensive line.
Yes.
He was telling me one time he was at an offensive line coaches conference down in former Miami offensive line coach Art Kehoe. He's kind of a legend in the business. And he was talking 30 years ago. He said, gentlemen, he said, I'm going to tell you what, the future of college football is going toward the wide receiver. They will be the prima donna. But I'll tell you what, the offensive linemen, you get in the fight, they're always going to be your best. They're the best guys on the team, typically character-wise.
Well,
I really think they are.
Well, interestingly enough, when you play youth football, I'm age 50 years old, so obviously it's changed, but it's a weight difference, right? You grow up, you're a patch player, you double patch player, that kind of thing. I think for me it was height. So I'm real tall, I'm 6'4". So, they put me like left tackle, in AYL, and sort of growing up, thinking this is the most boring deal that I've ever been involved in my life. It's hard to get excited about wanting to block and tackle because as a lineman, it's a thankless job, right? And then what do you think the coach gets? Even more thing. It's like when you win, no one thanks you, but you probably won because you had a great defensive line and a great offensive line.
That's right.
Yeah, especially in the SEC. It's and I've said this like 3 times, and I want to say it's I think Kiffin. I think they've gone in and gotten. That was a different story. Excuse me. Oklahoma has gone in, and the first step they made months ago when the 2023 season was over was they went after offensive and defensive linemen so they could compete in the SEC.
Well, remember what happened, Brenden. Great points. And I don't know if y'all remember at the end of the season, all 5 of Oklahoma's offensive linemen left, as did Dylan Gabriel, who's only 5'10", quarterback who's at Oregon now. Because I think he got feedback from the NFL that said, I don't think I'm going to be a high draft pick as a quarterback, so I'm going to take a bunch of money from Oregon. Smart decision on his part. But John Hartwell on the offensive line,
That was smart too, though, by the way, just to interrupt you, but that's
Yeah.
a smart move early on thinking about NIL, because I believe they have the most linemen or not drafted, taken from the NIL, the highest rated, I think, of anybody, because they made the decision early to probably let those guys, hey, you should go greener pastures potentially, because we're going to have to upgrade in size. And I think that they got into the portal early, which I think portal strategy now is everything. I think it's going to be bigger than recruiting. I think it's hard to even get excited about recruiting anymore when the kid can leave in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
I think that whole major multi-million-dollar industry is going to shift to like the NIL watch or what's happening. Happening in the transfer portal. John, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
Yeah, no problem. Well, I'll give you a perfect example of this. I was talking to a Power 5 coordinator the other day who's a friend of mine, talking about, and he just left one program, went to another, but talking about how they are handling the transfer portal from a recruiting standpoint. So, and this tells you again about the staff sizes, and I know Matt can talk to this with his son, but each staff member had 26 staff members who had a responsibility every week to watch the entire game footage of 5 teams, 5 FBS teams every week during the season, not knowing anything about who may be in the transfer portal, but they have, information just like huddle tape on high school kids. They have the same thing on every kid on an FBS roster. And, certain kids at the FCS level too. So, I mean, that just tells you how recruiting has shifted. And when you talk about a staff, a football staff having 40, 50 people, well, there's a significant amount of time being taken up by scouting their like FBS teams, just looking for potentials in the transfer portal.
Yeah. Right. Great point. And I tell you what, on Thursdays, and especially this time of year, this is a great chance because it's hard during season to take these questions. But I like Don Scruggs. Do you guys feel do y'all feel that coaching up a player is still valued in recruitment? We spend so much in coaching. Do they even care? I'll take a stab at it. I believe that we talked about Bo Davis, his great time at Alabama, then at Texas, and the defensive line for Texas last year. They had the Outland Trophy winner, the big defensive lineman Trevon Sweat, and they had 3 or 4 games where their defensive line just look what they did to Alabama. I mean, they got back there and got hold of Jalen Milroe a bunch, made his life miserable that night. And Bo Davis is now at LSU. They've got to restock their defensive line room. But I do think it's more important than ever. I've said this for years, that coaching is at a premium now, and knowing how to develop players, because Matt's right. And Bobby Bowden used to say this: I'd rather have a kid come in at 270 out of high school as an offensive lineman than coming in at 320. Because when they come in at 320, a lot of them look like Fat Albert. I mean, they're slobs. I mean, they were just bigger than everybody, and they can barely move. Matt Dean, one of the things, and I remember asking this to Tracy Rocker one time, who's coached at about 6 different SEC schools on the defensive line. He won the Outland and the Lombardi Trophy at Auburn in 1988, the first time ever any player had won both in the SEC. He said the number one thing you got to do with kids coming out of high school when they get to college is coach them your way, because they've grown up sitting in front of the air conditioning, being coddled, being driven around. He goes, when we grew up, you and I are the same age, Rob. He said, we were outside playing all the time. We were acclimated to it. And I think it's something to really think about, Matt Dean. And I want you to answer that real quick, Matt, and then Gary Harris from WVUA TV 23 and Tide 100.9 in Tuscaloosa will jump in this conversation. But it was Bo Davis, not Butch Davis, former coach, but Yeah, no. I'm just saying it's that big a deal, Matt Dean. I think coaching and development's everything.
Well, it's interesting, and Gary can probably allude to this. I saw, the only reason I know this happened because I saw the quote from the player, but I think the DB from Alabama, Peyton Woodward, left to go to Oregon this past week. And one of the things he referenced as a rationale was, he really loved Saban's style of defense. And I think it was more nickel used or whatever you want to call it because Saban's a DB guy. And that's one of the things that sold him on going to Oregon was just how they played defense. And no knock on the current staff, Alabama. That was a kid's decision it wasn't, I don't think it was a money thing because you're not going to beat Bama in NIL situations, but I think it was a style of play thing. And I think that happens a lot. It's why kids end up at certain places. And it's also why kids leave when their head coach leaves or retires.
Yeah, Gary Harris, I guess he was talking about maybe Caleb Downs, whatever, but player development. That first draft, April of 2008, no players from Alabama taken. Since then, it's like 151 with almost 50 first-round players. Someone like Quinnen Williams. I remember talking to Pat Dye Jr., who's a sports agent in Atlanta, and he said, someone asked him about Quinnen Williams, and his first reaction was, Quinnen who? And he said he hadn't played much. Marcel Darius, I think he played in 9 games, but he made that $1 million hit on Colt McCoy in the national championship. That's player development, isn't it? I mean, what Nick Saban did at Alabama was he worked those guys and got them to buy in. And as soon as he left, I mean, some of them left, but some of them are going to be processed anyway. But I think it's more of a premium than it's ever been.
Well, getting back to 08 and 09 when he kind of was establishing the program, it was just such a different time. And yeah, occasionally you'd have a guy leave. I mean, they would go and decide to transfer and sit out the year and go somewhere else. But for the most part, when you recruited and signed a guy out of high school, which was going to be 99% of the way Nick Saban did it, he might every now and then get a junior college guy to plug in. But basically high school recruits, you knew that you were going to have them for a minimum of 3 years, sometimes 4, sometimes 5. And there really wasn't as many options for them. So you could develop them. You didn't have to worry about them leaving. And so if you had a guy like a Quinnen Williams or a Marcel Darius, who you knew had a lot of talent and a lot of physical ability, but wasn't quite ready, to be a starter for you or one of your key guys, there was no need to rush the process because you had guys ahead of them that were really good players and they could learn and they could, get a little bit of playing time here and then a little more by the end of the year. As you said, Darius was a major factor in the national championship game, and Quinnen Williams actually redshirted, which a lot of people forget, and had been committed to Auburn before he signed with Alabama. So I think now the timetable is it's harder to do that, Rob. I mean, players aren't going to sit and be developed. They want to play and they want to play now. And if they can't play for you, then most of those guys are going to look to go somewhere else. And in some cases, it does start a revolving door. We're already seeing it where you got guys that are hopping around, in the portal, get to school, never even play a game there, back in the portal, go to another school. Next time the portal's open, they're in the portal again. So I fear that not only are you losing the opportunity to develop players are losing the opportunity to be developed in some cases because, every now and then you got to get somewhere and you just got to hang in. I think that's why you're seeing a lot of the top tier schools, whether it's basketball or football, recruiting now from lower or portal recruiting from lower level schools because those guys that didn't have as much attention coming out of high school went somewhere, played 2 or 3 years.
Kalen DeBoer,
were developed,
pedigree
and now they're ready to
Washington,
step into a major program
in
with
a short
experience
time
and are
period.
ready to go.
Hugh Freeze,
John Hartwell, I know you've got to jump off here in just a minute, but I agree with him what he said about development. And Nick Saban made some very fortuitous comments. I think he's the canary in the coal mine about a lot of these kids that are coming into the NFL, they're not developed like they used to be. And when he's going to be on TV more and more as we head into the 24 college football season, I think his influence could help. And if he's saying, and we need the NFL, we need people like, Jim Nagy, executive director of the Mobile Reese's Senior Bowl, to say stuff like that, because John Hartwell, it takes a lot of time to develop a lawyer. Would you want someone to represent you in court in the trial that you're on trial for murder? Some guy who got out of law school last week?
No, not at all. And I think this goes back to our point we were talking about earlier you know, making sure that these student athletes have wise counsel, if you will, for lack of a better term, in making transfer decisions, and not just saying, oh gosh, you know, I'm getting 50,000 in NIL money here, but I'm gonna get $100,000 at the next place. Look at the track record. Look back to that. You know, this goes back to the coaching component. I do think that you know, there are a very, very small portion of kids out there who have the raw talent that it doesn't matter who coaches them, they're going to be in the NFL. But the vast majority of kids who are going to be NFL players are going to have been developed in that 18 to 22, 23-year-old time frame. And if you have 4 different offensive line coaches with 4 different techniques, probably the end result may not be the greatest thing. But if you're with an offensive line guru, maybe sticking it out at the same place for 3 years so you can develop, gives you a much better opportunity. The other point I would make here is, again, if you've got an offensive lineman here at ULM and they're being recruited to Alabama or Ohio State or wherever, well, be careful that you're not being recruited to be, a 10 down a game player as opposed to an everyday player.
Yeah.
Because you're not getting as many game snaps. You're not getting as much film. And oh, by the way, in practice, and although there's an O-line coach and maybe a couple of assistants that help out, you're not getting the day-to-day instruction. And I think that's really important when you look at long-term career. And again, the difference in making a decision based on short-term satisfaction versus long-term goals. A lot of times 18, 19, 20-year-old kid does not have the wherewithal themselves or have the support system that helps them make the wisest of decisions.
Yeah, and I know my nephew, when he graduated from law school at the University of Memphis, he's Virginia Tech, got a master's in accounting. It was like, you stay in Memphis or go back to Roanoke, Virginia, where he's from. Well, he had an opportunity, got an offer from the top estate planning attorney in the state of Virginia and M&A work as well, who said, come up here, I'll mentor you, and I'll build you. 6 years later, my nephew, Ben, is still there. Damn proud of him. Hardcore. His dad played college football for Virginia Tech. You got to have help. John, let people, I know you got to go. I want to keep you on schedule. How can they keep up with you, follow you, and listen to what you have to say? As always, really appreciate your time being on with us every week. We love it.
Yeah, great to be here. Busy weekend here in Monroe. We are hosting the Sun Belt Conference Track and Field Championships, which crank up here in about an hour and 45 minutes. Got graduation this weekend. A lot of positive things going on. You can follow all things Warhawk Sports at ulmwarhawks.com. My Twitter, John_Hartwell. And guys, as always, enjoyed being on with y'all. And everybody have a great Thursday.
I'll talk to you later today, man. Thank you. Gary, and I'm going to say this too. Let me apologize to Don Scruggs, one of our viewers, because he had said, do you guys feel? And I said, do y'all feel? And he goes, born and raised in UGA country. My bad for getting my upbringing. I'm kidding with you, Don. I just want to make sure you know that. But I love all y'all. Matt Dean, you're from Iowa. Do they say y'all up there in Iowa very much?
Come man, I hadn't heard y'all till I moved here in 1991. It was like a culture shock. And when I went back up there, the following summer, I was fixing and fitting and all this other good stuff. And, but then I will tell you what's interesting is people still ask me if I'm from here or not, because I still have a little bit of speed in my Midwest accent. I'm kind of fast talker sometimes. So
no, you're very smart. I mean, you've got a memory like a steel trap. Gary, I want to throw it back to you and then to Matt. Talking about the NFL draft, it was weird. We had no linebackers, no running backs or safeties taken in the first round. What's that telling you about the current landscape of college football?
Well, the priority is offense, and offense with the modern rules, you used to say defense wins games, but now offense can win games too. You see games where it's 42-38. And the premium obviously is on the quarterback. You either, what I read was true, you either are a team that has a quarterback or you're a team that's looking for one. And 6 quarterbacks in the top 12 picks. Now, we didn't have another one taken for a long time, but still 6 QBs in the top 12 picks. And as you said, not very much of a run on defensive players at all. I don't think a defensive player was taken until pick 17. Or it might have been a little before that. But anyway, somewhere in that range. And that's just the modern game. It is what it is. Someone sent me a clip from YouTube the other day, and it was the 1977 Open at NFL Today on CBS. A great show with Musburger and Jimmy the Greek and what was her name from Kentucky?
Phyllis George.
Irv Cross. Well, anyway,
the
Open, guys, I'll have to send it to you because I used to love that show. I mean, that's how I started. Sunday before you watch the NFL, you watch the pregame shows, and NFL Today on CBS was the most popular. And in the Open, the guy said every one of these hits would be illegal today, and he was not kidding. And not only were they not illegal, they were what they used to promote the National Football League. I mean, you're talking about clotheslines. You're talking about forearm shivers. I mean, you're talking about kicking. They showed a guy kicking a guy when he's on the ground. That's the way you promoted the game. You promoted the game by being mean and nasty and aggressive, and defensive football ruled the day. And that's why Don Coryell with, Air Coryell with the Chargers, was so first the Cardinals and then the Chargers was so cutting edge because he had an offensive first philosophy. But the game is about offense now. Listen, there are still pockets where with a team like the Baltimore Ravens, a few others that they're going to play a different kind of more of a grinded out football. But most of these teams are playing air it out. All right, it's 35 to 24 late in the third quarter, but we don't care. We're down 11, nothing. We can score 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. I just think that's where the game's at.
Yeah, and we had 8 offensive tackles drafted in the first round. That's the most in NFL history. Matt Dean, that says a lot right there as well.
Well, if you're going to draft those quarterbacks, you better protect them, right? That's number one. Number two is, at being a Chicago Bears fan at 9, I really thought we were going to take Dallas Turner at 9 because we had added Montez Sweat last year, another edge rusher. But then when Rome Odunze fell and you took Caleb Williams at 1, you're kind of pressured to give him an extra weapon for the future. And I think sometimes position of need is really what things NFL scouts and GMs look at. And I will also tell you this, Bo Nix, I said for months, was a Drew Brees comp. I really felt that way. And for Sean Payton to get him at 12, I think that's a good fit. Now, I don't know if he's going to have a Drew Brees type career, but if you look at the offensive tackles, in today's game, if you're going to throw the ball, you got to have a little extra time. And what hurt the Bears, and you look at the plight of Justin Fields, who had a great career at Ohio State. He did not always throw to anticipation. And a lot of his plays were made, the terminology is off platform, right? Well, I call it out of the pocket, whatever you want to call it. And he was a great runner of the quarterback position. I thought he was a little bit like Lamar Jackson, but the difference is Baltimore won games, Chicago did not. So therefore, Justin Fields goes away and they try to draft someone else to get it right at the quarterback position. But like we talked about in an earlier segment, if you don't have the trenches right, if you don't have the defense right, if you don't have the right play caller, the quarterback, there's a stat out there, guys. Most of the time, most of these guys, of those 6, to be successful? I mean, look at what the Falcons did. They spent $100 million guaranteed plus on Kirk Cousins, and they drafted Michael Penix Jr. at number 8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many lives does a cat have? 9, 10? How many careers does Kirk Cousins have, Gary Harrison? His agent. Yeah, his agent's the greatest agent in professional sports. I mean, and I'm not saying he's not good, but man, he has been. Kirk Cousins came out of Michigan State. What was he taking in what round? I don't even remember. Gary?
He's been around long enough that he played against Alabama in the bowl game in Florida after the 2010 season when Michigan State was 11-1. and Alabama was 10-3. The great line that came out of that game was Sal Sinceri, who I got to be pretty good friends with.
Yeah.
Old school football coach. After the game,
Yeah.
Alabama absolutely destroyed Kirk Cousins in that game. I mean,
Yeah.
they beat him to death. And that was the year after the national championship, and they had lost to LSU and to Auburn and one more. But after the game, I was whatever the final was, 38-6 or whatever it was, and one of the Michigan State assistants came over.
South Carolina was the other one. Yeah.
With Stephen Garcia game, and the Michigan State said, "Congratulations, good game, Sal. How in the heck did y'all lose 3 games?" And didn't say heck, of course, coaching lingo.
Yeah.
And Sal said, "Well, I got a question for you. How in the blank did y'all win 11?"
Oh, hey,
but Kirk Cousins was was in that game. But to get back to Kirk Cousins, I thought that was a funny story. And if you know Sal, it wasn't heck or hell. It was another word. But he's a good quarterback, and the fact that he's only won 1 playoff game, I think, is mind-boggling, like you said, for the kind of money he's getting. But the Falcons, they were desperate for a quarterback. He was there to get back to what Matt was talking about with drafting Penix Jr. I still don't get it. And I think Michael Penix Jr. is a first-round talent. He's a first-round quarterback.
Yes.
But I just don't understand the logic. Talking with some people there in Atlanta, there was one guy who follows that team very closely and runs in money circles, so maybe he's right. He said that he was told it was Arthur Blank's pick, that was Arthur Blank's pick. So I don't know that, but it just does not add up that you sign a quarterback, you guarantee him, what is it, either $90 to $100 million, and you're going to sit Penix Jr., who's on a rookie deal, so that unless it goes south with Cousins, which you don't want, he's going to be sitting there not playing. So by the time you're going to play him, first of all, he's one of these guys that's 23 or 24 years old. The rookie contract's going to be expiring, and then you're going to have to pay him. And will you even know what he's capable of doing? I still don't understand it.
Well, it's interesting in Atlanta.
Unless Cousins gets hurt, and then you got a quarterback, I guess. That's it.
Yeah. And I mean, Michael Penix Jr. from Tampa, I think he went to Catholic high school, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe some Plant City, but I think he was from Tampa. But I know he signed with Indiana, went to Washington. He was really banged up in that national championship game. That was a sad scene when he was coming off the field by himself, going into the tunnel. I think he had some broken ribs, but he's a tough kid. I mean, that's football. But, you think about Ben Troop, who's a regular on this show, lifelong Falcons fan. Of course, he played at Florida and in the NFL. He said, "I'm going to have the Atlanta Falcons as my pallbearer so they can let me down one more time." And everybody I know in Atlanta, I know a lot of people over there, they're Falcons fans. I'm like, you knew Job, didn't you? I mean, it's just, you got to.
Well, I like to say, nobody can snatch defeat from the jaws of victory better than the Atlanta Falcons now.
No.
What time is it, Rob, by the way?
It is 53 after. Yeah.
Okay, I got
So tell us what you're talking about on your show today, and I know you got to get your tight schedule.
Well, we're going to go down to Louisiana and talk to a sportscaster down there about the upcoming Alabama-LSU baseball series, that epic Alabama-LSU softball game yesterday, and then, of course, coach's comments there that, they're not going to buy players at LSU, which makes absolutely no sense for him to say that now when buying players is legal. I mean, what is your motivation? Now, if you don't want to pay, if you've got a defensive tackle that's asking $1.2 million and you don't want to pay that much for him, that's one thing. But to come out and say, well, we're not going to get into buying players, that just I can't quite figure out. And he's, we know Brian Kelly's a good football coach and smart, but I think a lot of people are trying to figure out what was the motivation behind that. Okay, we're not going to pay players; they're going to come here just because they want to play at LSU. I don't get it. So we're going to discuss that, and also we'll talk with Jeff Spiegel from over in Birmingham. So that's coming up at 9:00.
Love your show. Gary, I love your energy, but more than anything, I love you're the local. You know what's going on in Tuscaloosa, and you do a great job, you and Rodney Orr, Tider Insider TV, and always love having you on. You are always jacked up, pumped up, and in a good mood. You don't need coffee. So see you next week.
I don't drink it. Hey, thanks, guys.
Okay,
see you later.
Take care.
Right.
You bet.
Bye.
Hey, Matt, what Gary's talking about the LSU thing. We don't. Brian Kelly made comments yesterday, and people. Okay, let's use it as an example. In the instant media that we have now, people saw a comment a few weeks ago. It was on Twitter. Twix is what I call it, combination of Twitter and X. Jerry Jones was on there, and someone had you can Photoshop and do anything you want. Jerry Jones, I'll pay any basketball commitment at Kentucky if he'll come to Arkansas, double the money. He didn't say that. We asked Dudley Dawson, Hogville.net, who was on yesterday's show. He said, no, he did not. He just said, he's saying he wants to support Arkansas.
Right.
That's what people need to understand. And people are misquoted and things are taken out of context. Just like you better, 1986 at Reykjavik, Iceland, when Reagan met with Gorbachev down there at the gazebo, he said, how did the meeting with Mr. Gorbachev go? He said, well, trust but verify was the message. Got to be very careful what you forward to somebody because, boy, it's like you can be made a fool quickly.
Well, as a Arkansas grad, and that's where he went when he hired his first football coach for the Cowboys with Jimmy Johnson, his former teammate.
Yep.
Of course he's going to support Arkansas. And he probably loves the hire of Calipari. And he probably loved Musselman when they were doing really well. And then things kind of blew up. Eric went back to the West Coast. And I think all of us were a little shocked when Arkansas pulled Calipari there, But what a great hire for Arkansas. I saw where they get another commitment. I think yesterday, one of Cal's players follow him over there. I think it was Therio. I heard DJ Wagner maybe next. I'm not sure. But, when you remember this, when Calipari was in Memphis, how electric was this city? It was electric. Oh, and then when he left, never want to see him again, right? But he kind of wears out his welcome over time. And that's what kind of happened up at Kentucky. Coach Cal was the master of the early on one and dones, right? But he also proved it's really hard to win multiple national championships with that philosophy too, because I can make an argument the 22, 23-year-old fifth-year senior is a man. And they can guard that 5-star 18-year-old. You know what I'm saying? So
yes.
I just think we've learned a lot from Cal. It'll be interesting. This is probably his last run, wouldn't you say? I mean, in terms of
he's not that old, but I think he just wants to prove. I think
he can do it again somewhere else, right? I mean, that's a lot of us that have this coaching blood. Rob, I'll be 57 in 10 days, 11 days, whatever, May 20th. And if someone contacted me and said, "Hey, Dean, you got one more run in you," I'd probably do it. It'd have to be worth my while. But I mean, once you build a program and you've had success, which I was fortunate enough to have here, you always feel like you have a template or the blueprint, right? Yeah. And, no different than John Calipari, except I make a lot less money.
Well, no, you're right. I think he should have left Kentucky 5 years ago, but I think he's going to change his model now. I think he'll look at the portal differently. And the one and done, you don't want to turn down a 5-star, but there's a big difference between 18 and 23-year-olds. Hey, check out all of our sponsors like the Vitamin Shop in Oxford, Mississippi, and Olive Branch, Mississippi. The Olive Branch is on Goodman Road, 5338 Goodman Road. Hewlett and Dunn Boot and Clothing Company on the historic square in Collierville, Tennessee. Kind of a great time of the year to go out there. They got a lot of stuff on the sale rack. Filson, Barber, Devil Dog Jeans, over 7,000 pairs of men's and women's boots. Great looking women's clothes. Dolce Vita boots. They have got more duck heads than I've ever seen anywhere. Charles Hall, his wife Laura, Raven, the whole crew, Lydia, JM, everybody out there. It's all about service. You will love HewlettandDunn.com on the website. And hey, Rumble Boxing, Matt. How you fight is how you live. Wake up, fight ready every morning. Rumble Boxing Gym, 1835 Union Avenue. And tomorrow, Matt, Coach Houston Nutt's going to be on the show with us on the Friday Roundtable from ECS House Industries. Chad House will be watching that one. House Industries, Breaking Ground, HouseIndustriesInc.com. Check them out. And if your car gets broken into and you live in Memphis, you probably need windows regularly. Tom Martin's Body Shop, G.E. Patterson and B.B. King open Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. They don't make them any finer than Tom Martin, his crew down there. Talk about building a culture. Those guys, I remember about 6 years ago, a big storm came through May of 18. blew the door down at the body shop, Matt, downtown Memphis. He got a call from his workers during the middle of the night. Mr. Tom, we're going to be down there to fix the shop and save everything. And, of course, Tom left in the middle of the night to go back with him. Tom Martin's Body Shop is fine a people as you will find anywhere. And Avery and Clay's Smoked Tuna. Check them out, claysmokedtuna.com. They've got smoked salmon, smoked tuna, smoked chicken, smoked buffalo dip. If they can be smoked, he can make a dip out of it. Clay's Smoked Tuna. They're all over Memphis. Just see where he's going to be. A lot of times they're at Campbell Clinic. Yesterday they were down on Jefferson by Juvenile Court. But all of our sponsors, they're all on the website. And if you want to get a home entertainment system, GaddisHomeInnovation.com is there. Matt, great show. Love all this fast-paced interaction. Again, it's if you take an off season, meaning that you don't do anything to try to get better as a parent, as a husband, wife, as a business owner, as a salesman, or doing these shows, you will fall behind. You know what? You got to find excuses to win. There is so much to talk about, but I think the message from today is player development. It's a big deal. But I think if you can build a culture, and I've been around your culture, you talked about Coach Duncan over at Rhodes. You had 3 freshman offensive linemen on your team, and you won 6 games last year. And people always say, well, for every freshman you start, that's a loss. Well, freshmen today are a lot different. But I think once we start seeing more of Nick Saban on TV, you watch what happens. There's going to be an effect, a ripple effect. By the way, I do enjoy when I'm traveling all over the place every day, listening to the Grateful Dead channel. I mean, I don't know what it is about those guys. I can't name off, all these people go, oh, yeah, you don't know the Dead. How many songs can you name? Well, I like Row, Jimmy Row. I like Ripple. But, the Deadheads, they have their way of looking at things, but a lot of really smart people listen to their songs, and it just kind of calms me down. I know I'm pretty jacked up like JoJo the Circus Boy sometimes, but I think when I'm thinking about what's happening in the college landscape, I think people like you and John Hartwell as athletic directors, administrators, have a huge effect when these kids come talk to you about their future, and you got about 5 seconds to decide. Am I just going to quit and just run? John Hartwell, if you got to rebrand yourself every 6 months, that's a problem. But you can't do that. But the Grateful Dead, I'll just say this. Michael Sagg, our musicologist, my friend, it's almost bluegrass. It's a combination of bluegrass and wild ass. They were geniuses. There's just certain groups that are, but I use the term ripple effect a lot. But staying power, branding, that's a brand. Jerry Garcia died almost 30 years ago, and he's everywhere. Well, you think about in sports, Matt Dean, the number of student athletes that stuck it out with you, that wanted to quit, that are now successful in whatever field they chose. I think you need to start having people, hell, I'll do it. I'll go talk to them about financial literacy. And I'll show them every client I have that has a lot of money, and none of them have ever pulled up in a Bentley or a Rolls Royce or a Lamborghini. Never. The people with $50, $100 million, they're driving a 10-year-old F-150 or, an SUV or an old Buick station wagon or something like that. Matt Dean, lot to think about. But your closing comments, and let me just say this. Most often we see the face of Christ in the least among us. We are the greatest country in the history of the world. It's your decision when you get up every day how you're going to live your day. Don't let other people walk through your mind with their dirty feet. That's what Gandhi said. Think about what that means. But Matt, love having you on this show. Your energy, your wit, and your wisdom, and your Midwestern practicality are unmatched anywhere in the free world.
Rob, I work for a Hall of Fame coach, Coach Herb Hilgeman, rest his soul. And every day he said, we're going to get better every day. We're going to get a little bit better every day. And that's the way I try to approach my life. And, one of the thoughts, Rob, quickly hearing you talk about financial literacy, with your relationship with Dr. Hargraves in Memphis, you should offer it up to some of those athletes over there, because I'll tell you what, they can need the help. But
Yeah.
It's always a pleasure, Rob. Enjoyed it. And until next time, keep developing.
Yeah. We'll be talking, but and the thing about it is, and I love the comments from the people. People send in as many comments as you want, because I love this time of year. It's a lot easier to answer questions and everything like that. But tell your friends, families, and neighbors about this show. Listen live. Sync us in your truck, your boat, your airplane, possibly at work. During lunch, of course, not to take away from production, but you can hear us live, YouTube and Facebook, and check out the Buddy Martin Show tonight, 9 p.m. Eastern, live on YouTube on the SEC Sidelines Sports Network and SECU channel. Till tomorrow, we're out of here. Thanks, everybody.
In a perfect world, you'd set a health goal and results would happen overnight. In this world, the real world, it takes time, dedication, and the right support to achieve your best self. The Vitamin Shop's health enthusiasts are here to make sure you're not wasting a single moment on the wrong supplements. From the highest quality sports nutrition and superfoods to the most sought after trends, you'll find a huge variety of science-backed solutions for every goal. And the people to help guide you along the path to greatness.
Unbelievably, every 2 minutes in our communities, a child is either bought or sold for sex. I am Ari Dickey, board member for the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. Join me and millions of others in our fight against human trafficking and for its victims by helping to educate the most vulnerable among us, our middle and high school students. Go to nhtcoalition.org, become a partner, and help keep our families safe, because none of God's children are for sale.